From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on this Tuesday. Nick Barris here, and good show on tap for you this morning. We are going to lead our way into our gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Vanderbilt Rape Trial. It's very possible they will seat a jury today. If they do, that's when our gavel-to-gavel coverage will begin. All day yesterday, quizzing jurors, trying to go through the process of selecting it. We're going to talk about that, some of the new developments, and where things go from here this morning with our News Channel 5 legal analyst, Nick Leonardo. Good morning again, my friend. Thank you. 2 days in a row, we're rocking and rolling, getting set for the trial, which once it does begin, they say could last possibly up to 2 weeks. But we want to take your phone calls as well if you paid attention. We're going to get into some of how the jury was being selected yesterday. I went over there and watched some of the questions that were being asked. I'll get some feedback from Nick on that. But the number is 737-7587 if you want to jump in. And let me ask you, Nick, they spent all day yesterday trying to select a jury. I think they made some headway. What do you think on the process, how far along they are?
Well, I mean, according to the paper, and according to the reports, they've dismissed 8, prospective jurors. So, I mean, they're well on their way. But of course, at any time we could have a jury. I mean, if they decide on each round, if everybody agrees that they're not going to strike anyone on that piece of paper they pass up to the judge, at that point, then that will be the primary jury.
Just curious, and there's Brandon Vandenberg, one of the defendants, Corey Beatty, the other one, both charged, among other things, with aggravated rape. In the courtroom, Brandon's family was there for the first time, his entire family. The judge, by the way, gave an interesting order saying that he did not want any physical touching or hugging between Brandon and his family in front of the jury or the prospective jurors. Why is that?
Well, I mean, he wants to ensure that there's a fair trial all the way around, and so I don't believe that would necessarily, be appropriate for there to be hugging and touching and those kinds of things. I mean, everybody kind of needs to be in place when the jury is brought in and remain in place until they are taken out of the courtroom. So it just appears as business as usual. You don't want to, prey on sympathies or have it appear as though you're doing that. Okay,
and what they're looking for is 12 jurors, and we believe 2 alternates.
2 alternates, correct.
Is how it'll play out. What do you think? Do you think there's a chance that they seat the jury? And I think if they did before lunch today, our gavel-to-gavel coverage would just definitely start this afternoon with opening statements.
Sure.
The judge said, and yesterday he did conclude things, and it'll probably be the same today at 4:30. A little earlier. We thought it might go till 5, but 4:30. So it's going to be close to see how quickly they seat the jury to see if he wants to start opening statements today or send them all home, clear your head, get ready, come back. We'll start fresh first thing in the morning. What do you think?
Well, it depends on what time they're able to procure the primary jury. And if after they get those individuals, then it could take some time to pick an alternate. Sometimes that does take a minute or two to find 2 suitable alternate jurors. So it depends on when that's done. But if they're completed somewhere around 3 o'clock, I mean, the judge may let them get into opening arguments or may send them home. I mean, if he's trying to quit every day at 4:30, which is kind of tough depending on where you are within that process, then he may just send them home if they were to pick a jury by 3 o'clock.
I wonder, could you be a juror? I don't know. I mean, could you be a juror? I'd love to be on a jury. I've never even been called for jury duty, but I would love to be on a jury to make that quick $10 a day, which is what they pay you. You get $10 a day, but your work has to let you off. It's your civic duty to accept jury. I think it's your duty to do that, of course. Some people have reasons. They have children, work they simply can't get out of. But it better be a darn good excuse. Otherwise, you should have to serve on a jury if you're called.
And you see that quite a bit there. Everybody's feels that their life is important, and it is. But when it comes to making sure that they're individuals who are not going to be overly impeded by their service on the jury. I mean, you run into a lot of these sorts of things with self-employment or children or things of that nature, or health conditions that make it impossible to serve on a jury for maybe 10 days.
Right. Yeah, it could be that long. Real quickly, your thought on selecting a jury and how crucial it is to the process. But let's first, you're the prosecutor. What would your ideal juror be in a case like this where you have 2 defendants accused of a sex crime? What are you looking for? Is there a profile in your mind potentially that you would say is an ideal? Would it be better to be a male, female, aged? Is that just too hard to say one way or the other? Ethnicity, things like that come into play?
Well, there's going to be many schools of thought,
Yeah, I know. Different debates on that. I mean, I would think a father with a daughter, I think would be a good juror for the prosecution. Now, that's generalizing, but I would think that father's going to say, gosh, if that were my daughter this happened to, I'd be furious. And I would think that a father with a daughter would be good for the prosecution. And if I was the defense lawyer, I probably wouldn't want him on there.
That's exactly right. But notwithstanding, the makeup or who they're actually trying to put on that jury, I mean, I think another important thing is, what are they asking those jurors?
Yeah.
And I think that the state's probably coming from the perspective of trying to find some individuals who can convict someone for a criminal responsibility. A theory under the law that, basically states that even though you didn't do it, because you were there, you somehow helped out, that you're going to be just as responsible. Yeah. And so I think they're trying to, really, I think both sides are starting to argue their case a little bit in front of the jury, just to kind of see, what the jurors say, what their take is on it, and kind of go ahead and plant that seed that this is where we're going.
Fletcher Long made reference to, and both attorneys that were doing questioning for the prosecution and the defense referred to older movies. Okay, 12 Angry Men. Fletcher Long brought that up, talking about the Henry Fonda character, and I barely remember that movie myself, and I know there were some younger members of the jury that probably had no clue what he was talking about, but he explained it to them. And Henry Fonda, his point was, are you someone that will stick to your convictions if everyone else is against you, or are you someone that will go along with what everyone else is doing? And his point was, in 12 Angry Men, Henry Fonda character stuck to his guns in the face of everyone else feeling a different way. And you wonder, that's him planting the seed that, you know what, all it takes is one juror to decide that they're not guilty. And even if everyone else says otherwise, that juror holds out. There's an acquittal or a hung jury or whatever.
That's exactly right.
But that is interesting. He was pounding on that. 12 Angry Men. Are you a Henry Fonda? And everyone said that they would stick to their convictions. It's interesting.
Well, and that's easy to say today, when there being questions. But, let's say that, you're 8 or 9 days down the road, maybe 12 days down the road, and,
that's what I was thinking.
A child's got a basketball game or something like that, and you want to get to it, or there's something important going on in your life, and maybe you're on the fence with your verdict, but you say, gosh, if I'm the holdout here, if I go ahead and agree with everyone else, then we're out of here in 20 minutes, and I'm going to make the basketball game. And that's simply not what you want. But that's also, these people are human beings, and today it's an attractive, proposition to be part of this jury. But as the days go on, it could very well become very cumbersome on folks and interfere with their families and other personal activities.
And just so we're clear, so a conviction would require 12 guilty votes.
Correct. It has to be unanimous.
An acquittal would have to require 12 not guilty votes. One holdout with 11 guilty would be a hung jury.
That's exactly right.
Which would mean either, oh gosh, we have to do this all over again, or maybe the prosecution decides we're done with this.
That's exactly right. A lot of times when you see a hung jury, the case will, not all the time, but it will end up resolving itself in some sort of a plea to a charge that the defendant likes a little bit better than what he could have been convicted for.
There's no question a hung jury is a victory for the defendant.
Yeah, I mean, you got to try it again, but yeah, sure it is.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
But before we take our first break, we're going to take calls throughout the morning from those of you maybe have questions about it or watched yesterday. Let's go to Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany.
Good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
I just want to say that I get tired of people jumping to conclusions and ready to convict these young men, and you haven't heard any of the evidence that's going to be presented. I think that's what's wrong with a lot of our court systems in this country, is that people are too ready to convict and jump to conclusions before the evidence that's being presented. That's why every day there's countless people being released out of prisons for crimes that they didn't commit.
Great point.
Yes.
That was one of the questions the defense, I saw it, Fletcher at one point asked, are you able to hear that these men have been indicted and are charged, but recognize that means they're guilty of nothing? Or do you assume they're guilty because they've been indicted? And again, the jurors all said, look, no, we understand. But I think some people, the general public, you hear someone's indicted, your inclination is to say, he or she did it. Yeah, it just is.
Sure,
Unless you really understand the process, the average individual thinks, oh, an indictment. Well, they wouldn't have indicted him for nothing. Probably did it.
Well, and Tiffany raises a good point, and that is, the jury's only supposed to consider the evidence, and the evidence comes from the witness stand, what the witnesses say, and the exhibits that are introduced at trial. That's the only thing that you're supposed to consider. And in any jury trial that I've had, the first question I ask in voir dire is, by show of hands, how many people would find Mr. So-and-so and Miss So-and-so not guilty? Well, at that point in time, everybody's hand has to go up, because all individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty, and by the state at their burden of proof which is beyond a reasonable doubt. And you have to hammer that. And I think a lot of times, you could go through the jurors individually and ask them to look at Mr. Vandenberg or Mr. Beatty and say, what do you see, an innocent man or a guilty man sitting there? And, make all of them say the word innocent. Those are innocent men. They are presumed to be innocent as they sit there. And that's something that, all good defense attorneys will hammer on in voir dire.
On that note, we're going to take a break. That's a great point. When we come back, what do you think? Tiffany makes a good comment there about, not rushing to judgment. Could you? I think she's the type of person you would want on a jury.
Sure.
Who's not going to make judgment until she hears all the evidence. Could you do this? What you've followed in the media, I'm just curious, because they're choosing the jury pool from right here where you're sitting. Could you be on this jury? I'd be curious to see what you think about that. If you have any other questions, join us. The number is 737-7587. Nick and I will continue talking about where we go next and what we expect later today, right after this. Stay with us.